Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nedarim daf Pei Bet. Today's daf is sponsored by Shane D. Kurtzman in loving memory of her mother, Allah Shalom, Rivka Bat Rav Simcha Bunim, on her 24th year at site. Deep appreciation for her encouragement to always keep learning. Okay, we're going to, I'll just remind everybody that the registration for the Shiur is up. We have this great program, so please register if you haven't registered yet. It's on Zoom. It's recorded for whoever can't. It'll be online as in all the other Shiur meetings. Okay, we're going to get started at the bottom of Pei Aleph Amud Bet. Ba'amine Rava me Rav Nachman. We're going to go back to the question we asked at the end of yesterday's daf. Rava asked Rav Nachman the following questions. It's actually a very short and pretty simple, straightforward daf. We're going to have three sugyot. The first is this question that Rava asked Rav Nachman. Tashmish hamita leRabbanan inoi nefeshu o dvarim shebeino lebeina. Let's just refresh our memory. We have a Mishna in which we started off saying in the beginning of our chapter that maybe actually I'll read the Mishna and go through it before we even start today's daf, because this will stand as the basis. There'll be a lot of parts in this Mishna we're going to get to throughout the day. So let's make sure you have it down pat, and then we'll move to our question. Elu Nedarim shum efer. I'm back on Ayin Tedem and Aleph at the bottom. These are the Nedarim, that the vows that a husband can nullify. Dvarim sheyesh b'hem inoi nefesh, im erchatz v'im lo erchatz, im etkashet v'im lo etkashet. This is what the rabbis hold is considered, as we translate literally, affliction of the soul. These are things that are hard for her to keep up with, and therefore the husband is allowed to nullify them to make his wife's life easier, so to speak, so she doesn't have to suffer. I bathe, or I adorn myself, or I don't adorn myself, basically refraining from bathing or adorning. I'm not going to get into exactly what the wording of the vow was. We had a whole thing about that. Rabbi Yosi says, Am Rabbi Yosi, Ein elu nidrei inoi nefesh. These are not considered vows of affliction. Ve'elu hein nidrei inoi nefesh. You want to know what is inoi nefesh? I'll tell you. So basically, the continuation of this Mishna is Rabbi Yosi. Amra konam perot ha'olam alai, hareze yachol lahapil. If she says, I forbid all the fruits of the world, he's now going to, even though he says, what is inoi nefesh, he's going to tell us some cases that are, some cases that aren't. Some cases the husband can nullify, some cases he can't. So if she says all the fruits in the world, he can nullify. Perot medina zo alai, but if it's just the ones in this area, this, whether you call medina, country, this section, this region, he can always bring in from some other place, and therefore he cannot nullify. This isn't inoi nefesh. It's not suffering for her. She says, just this store also, she can always get from another store. But that's the only store that will sell to him on credit. That's how we explained it. That then he can nullify it. Rabbi Yosi. Now you might notice something's interesting about the structure of this Mishnah. It said the rabbi's opinion, then it said Rabbi Yosi's opinion, then it went into what are nidrei inoi nefesh, and then it tells us at the end, this is divrei Rabbi Yosi. Did we not know that before? It's obvious it was Rabbi Yosi. So we're going to learn something about that coming in today's daf. In the meantime, let's go back to our question. Rava asked Rav Nachman. So according to the rabbis, because if you remember, we also saw this Tosefta where Rabbi Yosi put in the same category imer chas, imer kashet, and if a woman forbids having sexual relations. So the question that they ask now is, what about the rabbis? And as he said, that's not inoi nefesh. What do the rabbis think? Do they think it's inoi nefesh? Or do they think it's va'lim shebeino lebeina? Or is it just impinging their relationship? Because if she wants sexual relations with him, then obviously that's impinging on the relationship. Obviously, we talked about exactly what language she did. That was already earlier in the daf. So now the question is, and what's the real issue? Well, if it's dvarim shebeino lebeina, either way, he can nullify them according to the rabbis. But if it's dvarim shebeino lebeina, he only nullifies it to the extent that she'll have something to do with him. Meaning, as soon as she divorces him, he divorces her, and she goes and marries someone else. At that point, the nullification runs out. Okay, why does the nullification run out? Because it only had to do with things that had to do with them. Once he's no longer able to be connected to her, there's no longer any nullification. The nullification that he did then runs out. If it's inoi nefesh, it's nullified forever. So we have a very simple answer. Amar le tenitua. So Rav Nachman answers him and says, let's see it from the following Mishnah. Later in our chapter, it says, Nitula ani mina Yudim, which is basically the same thing. She says, I'm going to have nothing to do with any Jewish person, meaning I'm not going to have relations with any Jewish person. Yafer chalko. He can nullify his connection to this, which basically means it's beino lebeina, umeshamash, and he can have relations with her because otherwise, right, he's allowed to nullify that. That's things that obviously impinge on the relationship. But in the event that she gets divorced from him, and then she remarries and has nothing to do with him anymore, she'll basically be not allowed to have relations with any other Jews. And if you say this is inui nefesh, affliction, it should have been nullified forever. That's the way it works. Why should she be forbidden to all other Jews? Why should the vow come back into play? Sounds very simply. It's a very good answer, except for one big problem, which is the Gemara now says it's unclear, is this Rava rejecting the answer that Rav Nachman gave him, or is it the Gemara rejecting it? But either which way, it's a rejection of the answer. According to the rabbis, is the problem. And this Mishnah, Mishum de Nitulani min Yudim, Rabbi Yosi katanila. That Mishnah is said in the name of Rabbi Yosi. Now, how do we know it's said in the name of Rabbi Yosi? It doesn't say in that Mishnah. Okay, I didn't show it to you. But it doesn't say later in that Mishnah, this is Rabbi Yosi's opinion. But basically, they're saying it's clear that that's Rabbi Yosi's opinion. And according to Rabbi Yosi, it's not inui nefesh. Because remember, Rabbi Yosi has a much more narrow definition of what inui nefesh is. According to the rabbis, that's the question. And this Mishnah has something to do with the rabbi's opinion. This Mishnah is Rabbi Yosi. How do we know this Mishnah is Rabbi Yosi? Go back to what I said about our Mishnah having strange language or unnecessary language. Da'ama Rav Huna. Rav Huna said, Kule Pirkin Rabbi Yosi. This entire chapter and all the Mishnah we're going to see of all these cases, whether he can or can't nullify vows, is all Rabbi Yosi, which, by the way, we don't hold by. That basically means that Rav Huna is somewhat neutralizing all the Mishnayot of this chapter and saying from after that first line, which was the rabbis clearly, in came Rabbi Yosi, from then on in is Rabbi Yosi. How does he get this? Mimai. Kevan de katane Rabbi Yosi omer ein elu nidrei inui nefesh. Since it says in our Mishnah that Rabbi Yosi says, oh, this is not inui nefesh, and then proceeded to say what is inui nefesh. Then, right, lama li tu limitna, why did it have to say at the end of our Mishnah, hareze yafer divrei Rabbi Yosi? Why at the very end of our Mishnah did it have to say, this is Rabbi Yosi? Okay, when we know it's Rabbi Yosi from the earlier part in the Mishnah. Shma minami kam ve'elech Rabbi Yosi. From here you can infer, from here on in, those extra words at the end of our Mishnah were to tell you, not only is, it's kind of like saying colon, this is Rabbi Yosi, meaning not only what we just said, but everything going forward. And that's Rav Huna's opinion about our chapter. And this is going to come up again later in today's daf as another resolution to a problem. Okay, so right now we had Rava ask Rav Nachman a question about the rabbi's opinion. They tried to prove it from the Mishnah in our chapter, to which they reject and say this can't possibly be proven because the Mishnah is Rabbi Yosi and we were asking according to the rabbis, so it's left as a question we actually don't know. Which is very relevant to know what it is. Since we're not doing halacha shiur, we won't get into halacha l'maaseh. Best to just avoid making a vow like that. Okay. Amar Shmuel Mishmei de Levi. Now, the second part of today's daf is the statement that Shmuel says in the name of Levi. And what we're going to do is bring several difficulties from our Mishnah. Okay. And that's why I read through the whole Mishnah again to refresh your memory. Shmuel says in the name of Levi, Kol Nedarim Baal Mefer Li'ishto. Any neder, okay, this is just a general thing, a husband can nullify, even though it's not really any neder. Chutz min, other than hana'ati aploni sheino mefer. If she says, so-and-so can't benefit from me, okay, that's not inui nefesh. The fact that someone else can't benefit from her doesn't bother her. Aval hana'at ploni alai mefer. But if she says one individual in the world, okay, this one individual can't benefit, I can't benefit from him, that's already grounds for hafara. That's called inui nefesh. The fact that she can never benefit from this particular person, okay, man, woman, doesn't matter. This person she can't benefit from, that's already considered suffering, okay? The fact that, maybe that person will do something for her and she won't be able to benefit, that's inui nefesh, the husband can nullify. That's what Levi says, Shmuel says in the name of Levi. So now we start bringing difficulties. Okay, there's a study guide today, and this is all charted out. I didn't translate it, but it is in Hebrew, but it's charted out. You can kind of see at least the structure. Tanan, perot medina zoala yavila mi medina acheret. It says in our Mishnah, if she forbids the fruits of this world, this city upon her, then he can't nullify it to bring from another city. Now, this is the same idea. If she can't benefit from a particular individual, if she can't benefit from a particular fruits in a particular city, isn't that the same kind of thing? And if we call it affliction, one person she can't benefit from, all the more so it should be affliction if she can't benefit from any fruits in this area. So it should say, based on what Levi says in our Mishnah, it is inui nefesh, because that would be the same as the other. So Amar Rav Yosef, in order to resolve this difficulty, says, De ka'amra shetavi. The reason he can't nullify it was she didn't say all the fruits the way we thought in this city I won't benefit from. She said, I won't benefit from any fruits you, my husband, bring me from this city, which means if you're my friend and you bring me fruits, I can benefit from them. So she's not actually forbidding the fruits. She's just forbidding the husband from bringing her the fruits. That's not inui nefesh because so many other people can bring her the fruits. That's now different from her saying anything from you, let's say, okay, just think of yourself. And I say anything of yours is going to be forbidden to me. That there's no way around. But the fruits of my city that you won't bring me, well, someone else can bring me. So it's a much easier way around it, which is why it's not the same. Tashma, second difficulty. Similar, our Mishnah, what did it say? The fruits of this store are upon me, and yachol ha'afel. You can't. No, that's really similar also. Just like you said, I won't benefit from you. I won't benefit from this store. It's also the same thing. So why can't he nullify it? That should be considered affliction, according to our definition of Levi. Again, we'll just simply say, again, this is what we call an ukimta. The Mishnah is in a particular situation where she said, or we're adding words that weren't really there. She said, this store, you won't be able to bring me fruits from this store, but someone else could bring me, and that's why I can nullify, and that's why it's different from the case of Levi. To which the Gemara says, no, that can't possibly work. And the truth is, it's I put it on the chart as if this is rejecting just the previous one, but theoretically, I think it could also reject both of them. Okay, the resolution that we had to both of these difficulties. Because why? You can't say that it's talking about a case where she said just that you won't bring me, because look at the next line. But if it's the only store that will sell to him on credit, then he can nullify it. And if it's that she said only that you can't bring me from this store, he still shouldn't be allowed to nullify because still someone else can bring her from that store. So, somehow, again, it's a little bit strange because the husband was the one who was supposed to buy her the food, and it's the only one the Chaimani will sell to them on credit. But theoretically, the other person could buy from that store on credit for them, and they could pay them back. In other words, it doesn't make any sense that it's on credit. So, that it's particularly that he can't bring it from that store. And therefore, because if it was only him, there would be a way around it, and he wouldn't be able to nullify it. And therefore, here it says you can nullify. Therefore, you can't explain the Mishnah as being a case where she said to him, only you are forbidden to bring it to me. In which case, we're back to square one, which is the two cases in our Mishnah, the fruits of this city and the fruits from this store, right? Not in a case where it's the only place that will sell to the husband on credit, but those two cases say you can't nullify them. And they really are very similar to the case that Levi said you can nullify. So how does this work? To which, so now the Gemara is going to say, this is just continuing the difficulty. Since the Seifa, the last line about the store, is clearly not when, it's not a case where she said to the husband, only you can bring me. But it's where she says about herself she won't bring, or really anybody else can't bring me, where it's complete, in which case then it would be no different from the person of, so just like the Seifa is like that, the Reisha must be like that. Again, the Reisha being the earlier case, and then the earlier case should be a case where you can nullify. So Ela Reisha, Ein Yachol HaHafer U'Dekamai Tevi. And how do we then explain it? Turning now to Amubet. Umatnitim Rabbi Yosi. Oh, a much simpler answer. You might have even thought of this when we started, which is Levi is holding like the rabbi's position, which says, inui nefesh is a much broader category, which is why as soon as, let's say, I say, I will not benefit from you ever, that's inui nefesh for me. This Mishnah, you want to raise a difficulty from our Mishnah? Our Mishnah is Rabbi Yosi. Now, you don't really need to bring this because the Mishnah was clearly Rabbi Yosi. But in any case, they bring Rav Huna anyway. To Amar Rav Huna, Kulei Pirkin Rabbi Yosi. Umayin Yachol HaAfel, Mishum Inu Nefesh, Aval Mefrein. Oh, so let's stop for a minute. So basically, they say, how do we know the Mishnah is Rabbi Yosi? Because Rav Huna said the entire chapter is Rabbi Yosi, starting from our Mishnah. So it's very clear that our Mishnah is Rabbi Yosi. Again, maybe they had to bring Rav Huna because There's a small way to read this that maybe, I don't know, it's hard to say that anyone would say our Mishna is not Rabbi Yosi, okay? Because it does say at the end, Dibri Rabbi Yosi, and it said before, these are not Nidrein or Nefesh, and what is Nidrein or Nefesh? But either which way, it's very clear from Rav Huna that from, the third line of our Mishna already, the rest is Rabbi Yosi. So therefore, it's very simple. Don't raise any question on Levi from our Mishnah, because the cases in our Mishnah, because those cases are Rabbi Yosi's opinion. So of course, Rabbi Yosi said lo yafel, because Rabbi Yosi has a much more limited definition of what inui nefesh is. Now, before we read the next line, I'll tell you that some people don't actually have this line in their text of the Gemara. Some people do. In any case, what this line is saying is, umay ein yakol lahafel mishum inui nefesh. When we say in our Mishnah, the Rabbi Yosi says that these can't be nullified, we mean more limited than what we think it means. They can't be nullified because of inui nefesh. They're not considered affliction for the woman, because you can always get from another city, you can always all this. But he actually can nullify them for another reason. Now, this isn't necessarily, but if they cause some sort of tension between the husband and wife, like for example, that's the store he prefers to buy in. Not that it's the only store that will give him credit, but he wants to buy in that store. Or he doesn't want to have to schlep to the nearby village to get, or to the next area, region, however you define Medina, to the next country, right? Maybe it's more expensive to get imported products. Maybe he doesn't want to schlep there to get the other products. If it's causing some sort of issue and strife between the husband and wife, then he can nullify them for that reason. Okay? Meaning, now this is very interesting. What they want to say is, this is generally, it happens often in Gemara, methodologically, where we have a machloket. So we have a machloket, Rabbi Yosi and the rabbis. They always try to minimize the machloket. They don't want to have them on two extremes. He says this is inui nefesh, and you can nullify it entirely forever. And this is not inui nefesh, and it's not even beino lebeina, and you can't nullify it at all. No, they'd rather meet in the middle somewhere. So when Rabbi Yosi says, notice what he's talking about. These are not inui nefesh. They may not be inui nefesh, but they could at least potentially become things that are beino lebeina, in which case he can nullify them. But again, it's a limited nullification because it will only apply so long as they're married and even when they're divorced. But once she marries someone else, the nullification runs out. So according to the Gemara here, Rabbi Yosi does disagree theoretically about them, but practically there's not much of a difference. There's a minor difference. Again, if they're going to get divorced and if she's going to marry someone else, then the nullification will run out. But he just puts it in a different category. That was the second part. So we had this halacha of Levi. We brought some questions from our Mishna about it, resolved them basically, and said, oh no, those aren't questions because those are Rabbi Yosi and Levi's holding like the rabbis. And then we just had this added thing, which is, by the way, all these things Rabbi Yosi said, ein yafel, if it's going to create tension between them, then he is allowed to nullify them. Third part for today. Here we're going to have a machloket. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, Nadra mishtei kikaro. If she says, I will not eat these 2 loaves of bread in a vow, there's many interpretations what the case is here, but one of them, it's suffering for her not to eat, and the other one is not, either because one is hot piping from the oven, looks delicious, and the other one is old stale bread, maybe that's why, or maybe she's just not hungry for 2 of them and one is enough for her, or there's all sorts of other different interpretations what this is exactly, but I'm not going to get into those details. The main thing is that one is inui nefesh and one is not, for whatever reason. Now, he nullifies the vow, but he can only nullify inui nefesh. So now half the vow is inui nefesh, half of it isn't. So what happens? So according to Shmuel, because he nullifies the part that is inui nefesh, he actually nullifies the entire vow. Now, to what extent do we say this? So first of all, the basis that the Mefaresh says, the miyuchas l'Rashi, as we say, is because this principle. We learned this already. Neder shu hutar mikzato hutar kulo. If you partially get rid of a vow, you get rid of the whole thing. The same is true for hafara. Same thing for nullification. So once he does part, he does the whole thing. That's one interpretation. And then the Ran gives a bit of a different interpretation, says it's based on, or a very different interpretation, which is, Isha yeferena, says the husband will nullify. Now, yeferena, it could have just said Isha yafel, will nullify. Yeferena is he will nullify the vow, to which they say, from there we learn, he has to nullify the entire vow, which means that if he's nullifying part, the entire thing is nullified. So that's another way of interpreting. Now we're going to have to see, because I told you there's a disagreement. If that's what he holds, what's the basis for the other side? Seems pretty clear. So Rav Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, mefer lemitane ve'ein mefer l'she'ein mitaneh. Rabbi Yochanan, quoted by Rav Asi, says, no, only the part that you nullified is nullified. Only the part that's inoi nefesh is nullified. The other part is not. So how does he respond to the two possible ways we saw of understanding this? By the way, there's more ways of understanding it. It also somewhat depends on how you translate mitaneh and eino mitaneh, what was the nature of these two loaves of bread, but I'm not going to get into all the opinions. So if you look at the Rashi, again, it's not Rashi, but where it says Rashi on the page, the last two lines, he says, what about this fact that we learned a neder, that the chacham undoes part of it, the entire thing is canceled. That's because hafarat chacham is stronger. But hafarat ba, again, why are you mixing hafara and hatara? They're not the same thing. Just because it's true for undoing vows, not the same for nullification of vows on the part of the husband. He doesn't have as much power as the rabbis do. And that's why he can only, again, his power is limited to only do certain types of vows. So therefore, this vow has got two parts to it. So it's not going to be true. By the way, there's a whole thing about these are two loaves of bread. They're very similar. To what extent do we say this? What if she says, I'm vowing not to eat a loaf of bread and not to take a walk? So those are two very different things. And then, or if she uses the language of two separate vows, as if she's saying two separate vows in one mouthful. I won't eat this and I won't eat that. Then already there's more debate about whether even Shmuel will say maybe they're not the same thing, because they're two different things. And when he nullifies one, he's not necessarily nullifying the other. These are two very similar things, just one is inoi nefesh and one is not. So there's a whole issue with that as well. So now, what about according to the Ran? If you go by this isha yeferena, so if you have to be mefer the entire vow, to which the Ran explains that according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's the entire vow that's inoi nefesh. So if there's a vow that has part that's inoi nefesh and part that's not, yeferenu means he has to get rid of the entire part. Still, he agrees entire part, but entire part that's inoi nefesh, and not the part that has nothing to do with affliction. So he takes the same pasuk and the same drasha, but understands a little bit differently. So there's, again, a debate about whether it has to do with neder shutam risato tarkulo and whether we apply that to nullification as well, and that's the debate. Or is it how to understand this isha yeferenu? He has to do the entire thing, but is it the entire thing or the entire thing that's inoi nefesh? So that's the debate. Now we have a different version, which is really, it's not so different, but we're going to see. Some people told the sugya in a bit of a different way, that instead of Rav Asi quoting Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Yochanan said blah, 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 right, that he only is made fair part, it was that by mine Rav Asi Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Asi asked Rabbi Yochanan, he posed the question to him, if she vowed against two vows and one was affliction for her not to eat and the other one wasn't, what's the halacha? To which Rabbi Yochanan answered, this matches what Rabbi Yochanan said earlier, so he gave him the same answer. In other words, this is just a different version. He said, he's only nullifying that part that was affliction, not the part that wasn't affliction for her. To which, and I'm going to end here, Eitive, because we're going to start a source that's going to go into tomorrow. We won't really get anywhere if we read just the first few words. But basically, Rav Ashi is going to raise a question against Rabbi Yochanan from a Tannaitic source. So that we're going to read tomorrow about a Nazir, which is good. It's, you always see toward the end of Masechtot, they start quoting Gemaras from or Mishnas from the next section. So anyway, we're going to see a sugya about Nazir that he's going to quote as a difficulty, to raise a difficulty to Rabbi Yochanan, and we'll see how he responds. That's it for today. Wishing everybody Shavua Tov. See you tomorrow.